In 2014, leadership development coach Cathie Ostapchuk was on a plane home from a conference in the United States when she began to tweet, "Where are our women?" After listening to inspiring American speakers, she was gripped anew by the lack of a national identity for Canadian Christian female leaders. And she's joining me today to talk about what's happening with women in leadership in this nation and how we can foster a more supportive and empowering environment for them. So Cathie, I know we're going to have a great conversation together. I know our hearts beat with the same passion to see women walk in their destiny and calling. But let's begin by talking a little bit about this dichotomy. So many of us follow and we give to buy resources from female Christian leaders in the United States. Why are there so few true female Christian leaders in Canada?
Well, that's a great question, and I think it started with my own story. Born and raised here, I did a lot of my schooling in the States, but I would always come back to Canada and ask this question: where are our women? We are Canadian, and we tend to define ourselves more by what we're not than by who we are. And we're quite polite, and we're nice, and we're timid. And maybe we're not as large when we show up in places as our American counterparts. And so I wondered for myself what it would take for me to actually step up to the plate. I kept waiting for somebody with more leadership experience, somebody that was better educated, more seasoned, to kind of take up the reins and do this thing in Canada. And speaking about the conflict, I had a lot of it in my life. I was a creative. I did a lot of large-scale worship and musical, creative arts experiences, and not without, some rushing in the relationship areas. And I remember when I stepped into leadership, co-chairing the Just Give Me Jesus revival in 2006 with Anne Graham Lotz, my lovely co-chair Hilary Price reminded me over and over, "Cathie, you cannot do for others what you have not allowed God to do for yourself." And so that became sort of my journey of personal leadership, self-leadership, personal awareness. What was it going to take for me to actually be confident enough to step into those leadership spaces that need to be filled in our nation?
There's a sweet tension, there's a tightrope that leaders walk, regardless of their gender, male or female, that we're so well aware that it's not about us, and yet we have to step up. We have to step up like Daniel did and like Esther did in order to create space for us in the culture that we live in. But Cathie, how do you do this without performing? Because that is the place of tension, isn't it? That we don't want to perform. And I know you've experienced a lot of that in your life. So coach us for a minute here. Tell us how to lead without performing.
It's tough, and I think very few people do it well. I think Jesus was the only one who could live so secure in his internalized identity that he never had to perform. He never had to be relevant to everybody. He was relevant because he was the Son of God. For me as a woman, I think I was born, like every other woman in Canada or anywhere in the world, having to prove myself, having to prove my worth. So being given some gifts in the creative arts, I pushed myself to achieve. I wanted the best orchestra, the best choir. I wanted to fill those seats with the best people. I wanted everyone to work together and produce a beautiful sound. But when the evaluation came and you missed something or somebody gave you feedback that it wasn't their style, automatically you didn't feel that you had performed to a great level. God certainly got my attention. I got stuck in an elevator one day downtown Toronto. I remember the day like it was yesterday. And thank God I did get stuck, because I was checking my email and pressing the button, and I would have gotten in my car and driven fast and probably put other people in danger because I was on to the next performance thing. And he got my attention and basically said, "Cathie, the door's not opening because that's not your door. You can no longer perform to please me. You actually have to be connected to your purpose." And in the work I do now, it totally stemmed from myself getting clarity and becoming visible and creating a vision for my life, because I needed to find out what that one thing was I was placed here to do, and it wasn't to perform.
So after the elevator, You worked on clarifying your values. You figured out what you valued in life, and you've begun to live out of that place. Do you think that's something that we all need to do, to clarify our values?
Yeah.
And how did you do it?
Okay, I think every person that has the space to do it and the desire to do it should do it, because my values help me make my decisions. They help me say yes to the best and say no to the good. My top value is stewardship. So everything that I receive, everything I learn, I want to give out. That value of stewardship makes me want to live a life that when I'm done, I want to be fully spent but not burnt out. Performance will burn you out. But living in alignment with your top values will leave you fully spent, serving the kingdom with your best strengths.
Oh, I love that. You know, so many women make decisions based on emotions or on circumstances, but it's so important to make every important decision based on our value system. What do we value in life? Well, then after values, the Lord spoke to you about the importance of becoming visible.
Right.
Now, what does that mean, becoming visible?
Right. Well, becoming visible means you have to be willing to push through fear. And I talk a lot about fear because that seems to be the demon of the century that we live in. We all have fears. We have fears that we're aware of, fears that we're not aware of. And my fear was that I wouldn't be who people thought I was. My fear was that I would fail. My fear was that something bad was going to happen. I wouldn't be able to get through it. I mean, whatever your fear is, you have to be able to change the way you think. And I think for me, it became changing from a scarcity mentality to an abundance mentality. I've been given everything I need in Christ. I don't need to fear, you know? He is the victor. And I need to be able to push through fear, raise my hand, become visible, and say, where in this nation can I be used for kingdom purposes?
That is so powerful. And then after becoming visible, you talk about becoming visional, which for me, it's where the rubber meets the road for a woman, because we're consumed with folding laundry and fixing the next meal and changing a diaper. How do I have time to dream? How do I have time to become a visionary? But for you, it's been a very important part of your journey. So help us with that.
Right. I think for me, it was important to finish well. Again, with my value of stewardship, I wanted to finish strong, finish well. So where do I focus my influence? And I spent so much time planning. I was an event planner for many years, and I planned my children's birthday parties to the point where my daughter came and said, "Mom, do we ever have spare time in our parties?" And I'm going like, "No, you don't, because this is well planned." We would plan our vacations, but very often we don't plan our own lives. And I looked at my life and I thought, I'm just running, I'm just doing the race, like one performance to another, one worship leading experience to another, one event to another. How do I see the long haul, and where am I going to end? And then I start aligning my values and my strategies, and I start going one step at a time in that direction. And I love how Eugene Peterson says it is a long obedience in the same direction. And every step, every decision you make either takes you closer or takes you farther away. So every step I just go, Lord, take me closer.
Take me closer, Lord. I love this quote that I read of yours. I no longer live to perform. I now live to leave a legacy. What a powerful way to live. How can you encourage us to live for legacy rather than for performance? What are some of the practical steps that might take in some of our lives?
Right. Well, I think when we're concerned about the circles of our life that are on the peripheral, where we really don't have an impact or can make an impact, we get farther away from legacy living. But when we look at our sphere of influence, who am I immediately responsible for? Well, my family of origin, the person I'm married to, my siblings, my children, that is our leadership domain right there. And we start with that. And if we end with that and God does not expand that, that's where our voice needs to be heard, and we need to be intentional in the legacy we're living there. I think many women are out in these larger circles and wondering, why does my life not have meaning? Well, we start with our immediate sphere of influence. And so talking about conflict, I work all the time and make sure that my key relationships, my primary relationships, are in alignment with my values. And I'm telling you, that's where it's the toughest, to be that person that can live clear and visional and visible. But if you start there, God will have you go out with integrity.
So you make sure that your key relationships are free of conflict. How do you do that?
Well, I think the myth is that they should be free of conflict. I think you always, especially if you're a leader, you need to create conflict if it doesn't exist, because healthy conflict is where ideas are born, is where creativity comes, is where vision comes from. If you look at Jesus' life, every single day there was conflict. Every single day people did not agree with him. And he created it. He turned tables over in the temple. He asked questions. He drew people in. And that's the kind of life I want to live. It will never be free from conflict, but it should be healthy. And if it's not there, we should try and create it.
Wow, that's quite the challenge. Well, what is the difference between healthy conflict and unhealthy conflict?
I would say authenticity, being in touch with your emotions and asking yourself, what am I feeling and why? Because emotions can tell us about ourselves, and I think it's good to be real with them. I think when relationships are enriched by the conflict, that's healthy conflict. And I think about Jesus' conversation with those that wanted to stone the woman caught in adultery. That was a situation full of tension, full of conflict. And he let it sit, and he asked hard questions, but he sent them away enriched to self-learn, self-lead, and he sent the woman away full of hope for the future. But it was still very real and very truthful. And I think when you can bring truth on this end, grace on this end, and bring them into this beautiful place in the middle where you can hold that paradox, and it's a place where it's carrying candor, that's where conflict can do its best work.
Cathie, that is so beautiful. We've covered so much ground today, and I know we've only just begun to tap into the wealth that's in your heart. But thank you for being our guest today. And as you go on this journey of gathering the women of Canada, please know that we're going to be praying for you and cheering for you all the way.
Thank you. God bless.